Hello, everyone. You know who it is. It's the Presence Posse, and we are presenting today Presence and Curiosity. Today it's Bobby Cobb, I am Cobby One, and Miriam Siegel, that's me. And I'm curious about Cobby One. Tell me more. I am Cobby One. You like
Uh,
that, don't you? I always want to call you Bobby One, but you choose Cobby One.
Cobb's my last name, so yeah, it could be Bobby Wan, but actually the way that I pronounce it is Kobe Wan.
You say Cobby One.
So that's an homage to Obi-Wan Kenobi from the old Star Wars thing. And friends of mine, when that movie came out, I think feels like I was in college maybe when that came out. I don't remember exactly. Um, and occasionally I would say something that was struck people as kind of a wise old saying, or I'd have a quote from something that I had read someplace, and we were at this big party one time, and somebody's like, "Man, you're a regular Kobe Wan," and everybody laughed, and it kind of stuck there for a little while. So it's just always. Last week I was Bobalicious,
Yes.
so just fun to play around with the name and be curious
Yeah.
about what
Be
the
curious and have a little
reaction.
fun.
Yeah.
Curious and presence.
Yeah, well, I love this topic.
Yeah. Why? Why do you
Why do
love
I
it?
love it? Why I think curiosity, if if you think about it, as we are practicing, as we are in presence, and particularly to the degree that we are embodying present, and being mindful of the moment and life as it is showing up right now, if we can do that, or as we do that, probably a better way to say that, as we do that without being attached to any specific outcome, without wrestling the way that life is unfolding or attempting things to happen a little bit quicker. Curiosity, I find, is an excellent way to stay present and stay in the moment. And one thing about the present moment, we never actually know what's going to happen next. It feels like we do because the next moment in time, or the next hour, or the next day, however you want to look at it, whatever unit of time you're looking at, you got a pretty good idea of how things are going to go down most of the time. But that's because we work with probabilities, and we know that if we're going someplace and driving there, and if we've got an appointment at 3 o'clock, and if we leave on time, we're probably going to make it. But we could get in an accident, there could be a traffic jam there, we could have something come up, maybe a client calls, and there's always a chance that it may not happen. And if you're just approaching uh, life with the idea of, wow, let's just be open to the possibility of what could be happening next, and be curious about how something may work. And it just I feel like it invites a certain amount of playfulness.
Mhm.
You can be curious about, if you do something a little bit different from the way that you've done it before, how's that going to unfold? And of course, we never really know. But I just like the idea of approaching life with a sense of awe and wonder, and really curiosity. I think that is just a good time frame. I mean, if you think about this podcast, which I think this is about our 80th that we've done, we started it. We're closing in on. We're over a year and a half ago that we did it. It was 6 people, or I think it was 8 back then, that we were we just connected. We were in that group and we said, hey, we ought to do a podcast. And we approached that with a sense of curiosity. And Coach Malcolm, thankfully, one thing that he did that I'm so grateful for was just really ironing in that mindset to us. If we're going to do this, and he was kind of the one that was operating the tech there early on. You've sort of taken over that role, and I'm going to have to take that role over here since you're going to go on vacation soon. He made us all commit to say we will be in this for 90 days, and we will be there for 90 days. But we came at this project with curiosity. We didn't know if we would click. We didn't know if there would be chemistry, but we thought it was a good idea. And we said, let's just, gives you the courage, I think, to kindly experiment and try things out and just be open to some new ideas. What's your thought on the subject? I don't want to dominate the whole dialogue here.
I thought it was great, Bobby. You can dominate.
Thank you.
I mean, there's a reason we do these things, and that is because we do have a certain amount of experience and reflection about the topics. So dominate away. One of the things about curiosity for me is, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I was born curious. There is that coming into the world and then having the rest of my life to discover it and experience it. So there's this sort of innate curiosity in being human. And curiosity keeps me present. Curiosity keeps me aware. If I'm curious, I'm noticing.
Yeah.
If I'm curious, I'm open. I haven't concluded anything. I'm paying attention. I'm aware. And that is presence. And that whatever experience that is connected to that, whether it's ecstasy or joy or gratitude or whatever. And as you say, we don't know. I mean, each moment is a moment. There's no such thing as a moment, if you know what I mean.
Or we could look at that as just one long moment that we have the ability to kind of slice up into smaller pieces. But yeah, I get it.
It's a constant movement. And so I can really, ideally, always be curious. Always pay attention.
And I love that you brought up the idea of curiosity as an innate feature of the human experience. And if you think about a little baby, they are unbelievably curious. If they're moving around and they find something new, they want to experience it through every sense. They might pick up a piece of paper and they rub it on their face and they try to tear it and they get frustrated with it, stick it in their mouth, crinkle it to see what kind of sound it makes. And it is really creating a sense of exploration. So, yeah, I've never really thought about that as, there's a lot of things that I talk about, well-being and resiliency and joy and love and bliss that are innate to our existence, installed at the factory by the manufacturer, part of the original equipment. And curiosity is definitely, you can see that in any baby. They're constantly exploring their surroundings and open to whatever newness may come along. Sitting there with a cup of milk on their tray and they're curious as to what kind of sound it'll make if they push it off the side. And
yes. Or what if I bang it and the milk goes everywhere? And there are so many experiences, and every moment is an invitation for another experience. And my mother used to, when I was a kid, she would say, I'm never bored. Sometimes when we were kids, we'd go, Mom, we're bored. I've never been bored, right? That would be very, very irritating because it wasn't really an answer to anything. But for me, it was always an invitation to be curious about that. Her saying she was never bored. Well, what's that about?
Yeah.
So I noticed I wouldn't get so very irritated with her so much as I would get curious about, okay, you're never bored. What's that like? Like, how do you not be bored? And Eckhart Tolle, he laughs a little bit about people who go jogging or training and he goes, they put things in their ears, he says. And I think that's really funny because the way he describes it, but it's also, I mean, sometimes, yeah, I want those things in my ears and I want to listen to some program or a book or whatever, or music. And sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just want to be with whatever is and be curious as to what is. I can walk the same path every day and it's never the same path.
Yeah.
Never. I can do the dishes every day. It's never the same. I can take a shower every day. It's never the same. So people who go into the mundane and experience it as mundane may have lost connection with the immediacy, with the moment, may have lost the curiosity. It's like people who eat the same thing. I actually, I'm one of those people who, when I find something I like, I can eat it every day for months. When I first moved to Norway, I discovered what they call plane crash. And it's actually mackerel fish in tomato sauce. And
Hmm.
it looks like, yeah,
Looks like
looks
a
like a
plane
plane crash.
crash.
Yeah, yeah. So they call it plane crash. And I ate it every day for lunch for like 3 months.
Hmm.
And then, well, that was enough of trying that out. And then I was curious about something else, but it never got old. It was like every day I could look forward to my plane crash. And I knew what I was getting, but it was never the same. It was never the same experience. There was always like the experience of, okay, I'm going to open this up and I'm going to smell it. And I get the smell of it. And oh, I love that smell. And then I'm going to put it in my mouth and just the whole dynamic of the whole thing. And then, of course, realizing that, okay, I've done that for a while. I'm going to change it up and do something else and experience a completely different thing. And I can stay on that for 3 months too. But there are people who live their lives craving predictability, where they will want to eat the plane crash every
Yeah.
day because they feel safe that way.
Yeah.
And that will happen often in people who have experienced trauma. They lose their innate curiosity becomes masked
Yeah.
or muted. And it can take a lot of work to get that back, because daring to be curious and move out of a comfort zone can feel really, really dangerous if you have a lot of bad experience.
As can daring to be present.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you are present to the present moment, particularly if you do it by releasing the attachment to things, releasing the cravings, releasing the desire of having things turn out a certain specific way, then there's a risk in that. You
Mm-hmm.
don't know how it turns up. And the type of hypnotherapy that I teach, I've labeled it liberation hypnotherapy. That's just my own branding of it. I didn't invent the system. I've added a little bit to it, kind of making it my own. But it's a system that I learned elsewhere, and it does not involve any scripts. It does not involve a lot of pre-work in advance. And the biggest thing that new hypnotists, anybody who learns this system, has already been trained in the basics of traditional hypnosis or hypnotherapy, and that involves scripts. And
Mm-hmm.
there's big books that you can buy that are phenomenal. I mean, they're on any subject that you might come across. They'll give you metaphors that you can use in the hypnotic process to use with the clients. And, it's good, particularly when you're beginning to kind of go through those books, but people get so reliant on that. And this involves a sense of curiosity on both ends, because
Mhm.
it's curious for the hypnotist, because we don't know what's going to show up and we're going to deal with whatever it is that shows up. And often clients will say, well, what's the plan? And it can be a little bit disconcerting to some folks for me to say, I don't really have one. Let's see what shows up. And, I'm sure the plan will present itself as we go along. But for the client, when, I'm doing the work with them, I will say some version of, in a moment, I'm going to count from 3 down to 1 and snap my fingers. And when you hear the snap of my fingers, something may unfold. And I'll just offer the suggestion to them in trance. Don't be attached to it being anything in particular. Just be curious to notice what comes up. And I want to just, what I think it does is put people in beginner's mind. And so
Mm.
I've got a quote that I'd like to share. This is from Shunryu, which I suspect I may not be pronouncing correctly. Shunryu Suzuki, he's a Zen master of some note, and he says, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. In the beginner's mind, there is no thought that I have attained something. All self-centered thoughts limit our vast mind. When we have no thought of achievement, no thought of self, we are true beginners. Then we can really learn something.
Mhm.
And that to me, the pathway to presence and the pathway to beginner's mind, and beginner's mind is about being present and being open, and and fostering this sense of exploration and exploratory mindset, and open to all possibilities. And my experience in doing this type of work, both in my own personal experience and that of clients, is that we're more open and we're more easily able to pick up on the happy coincidences that that pop up that are useful. And there's a part of our brain that is on the lookout once we decide to go for something. So, for example, before we got on this call, I was telling you that we're currently in the market for a new truck, because the one that we have doesn't really fit the needs that we have up here in Alaska anymore. So now there's a part of my brain that, just as I'm talking to people and I'm out on the road and I'm researching things, that part of the brain is going to be on the lookout for things that might help me with that particular quest.
Yeah.
And curiosity is a big part of that.
Mhm. I notice as I listen to you that curiosity, generally speaking, um, necessitates a certain level of trust and a certain level of empowerment, self-empowerment. It's like when I hear you say something like you encourage people to be curious about something and open to something, then I get curious about how do you empower them to do that when in the cases where they don't have the trust required to be curious?
Hmm. I'm just thinking about that as you're asking the question.
Because a lot of therapy has to do, in my experience anyway, has to do with helping people experience trust, choose trust, and understand that they are strong enough to handle the majority of things that come their way. Because
Yeah.
they're not little children, powerless little children anymore. It's like understanding that, okay, now I'm a big person with a big body, and it's going to take a lot for somebody else to overpower me, really, generally speaking. Whereas before, when I was a kid, I was at the mercy of everybody. So, and sort of changing that mindset so that they understand who they are. I'm just curious if that comes into play in hypnosis, where you invite them to be curious.
Yeah, I definitely do the invite and I offer the suggestion, but anything in hypnosis is just a suggestion.
Mhm.
And oftentimes those suggestions do not get taken. Sometimes they do. And, other times there is a resistance to that. And when that shows up, that becomes a new pathway for continued exploration. And I think as often as not that's actually conversations that take place outside of trance. And the work that I do is both there's uptime talking just like this, and both before we go into a session and then once we come back out again, and people will have new insights. And I certainly I don't have the reason that I'm looking around kind of searching in my mind. People who've studied NLP will know that I've got a visual part of my makeup as I look up and around to try to search for the answers. That tells you that you're accessing visual cues. And I think as often as not, it's dealing with it as it comes up. But I feel like, and maybe we can explore this a little bit, that almost everybody can think of a time when they started to work on a particular path. And they maybe had a goal in mind and they get a little bit, maybe 25% of the way to the goal that they had set with themselves, and that got them far enough down the path for them to go, oh, this isn't really, it wasn't about this. What it wasn't about creating the greatest school that anybody had ever created. It was really more about creating this sense of community. And both of those have got similar trails that you're going to follow for a little while, and that's part of the exploration, I think. Does
Yeah.
that make sense? And
Yes. And those of you who are watching, you're more than welcome to comment and let us know if you think it makes sense.
yes, or to ask questions. We can actually see your comments here on the side of our screen, so
Yes, we
feel free to
can.
weigh in.
Yes, we can. Thank you very much. I'm curious about curiosity. And when I wrote about what we're going to talk about today, and I put it on Facebook, the first thing I wrote was "Curiosity killed the cat." That's what we're often told. Oftentimes, just because we're children being children, and then we're bothering some parent or aunt or uncle or somebody, and they tell us curiosity killed the cat. So we ask many questions, for example. So I'm curious, and I mean, there's curiosity and there's curiosity. Curiosity where it sort of goes to nosy, right? Where my curiosity is something other than pure, whatever to call it, something pure curiosity, which is, it's like taking the innate curiosity a step farther.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where I actually have a hidden agenda. I want something. There will be often a manipulation in it,
Yeah.
or some goal that I'm trying to get at. That's not the curiosity we're talking about. However, it's possible to be curious about that kind of curiosity. Like, why is it I'm so curious about this?
Yeah.
Why is it I'm not letting this go? What is going on with me? What is going on with that thing? Um, what is it that has me choosing to go in this particular direction? Where I,
Yeah.
for example, sorry, sit at Christmas dinner. I mean, we're moving towards Christmas. So I sit at Christmas dinner and want to start asking very personal questions about people's jobs or personal lives or whatever. That is not being present necessarily, and most likely not being present to what is, not the kind of curiosity to which we are referring. That's something else. That's digging. That's, yeah.
Yeah. And as you're describing that, what's coming up for me is that's almost seems nosy.
Mhm.
And those are probably a pretty fine line between that. We might be very curious about a lot of things that the person may not have an interest to share. And I can remember one time when I was a financial advisor eons ago, I had a retirement plan that I was trying to sell, and I was absolutely convinced that we were the best uh, offering for the company that was choosing the retirement plan, but we lost the deal. And we had presented in front of each other to this big board, and so everybody kind of knew. There was a lot of transparency in the process, which was pretty cool. And so, listening to my two other main competitors, I'd made it down to the final three, and I thought, oh, this is mine. I totally own this, and we're definitely going to get this. And then when we didn't, uh, they announced to who had won, and they said, if you want to follow up with us, those that didn't win, you feel free to. And I did, and I was just like, I just really have to know. And I think part of that was looking for some sort of justification or rationalization or an excuse, because I had told an awful lot of people that, oh, this is a done deal. I've got this. And, my wife was going to wonder, well, what happened? Because it would have been pretty lucrative. And my boss was also wondering what happened, because that would have been very helpful for me hitting my goals that I have. So, I was pestering the company to really understand it. And I think I remember, I don't know if I used the phrase curiosity, but I feel like I was asking them, I have to know, you have to tell me why this is. And he said some version of, your deep desire to know the interworkings of our rationale,
Rationale.
rationale. Yeah, thank you. Um, no way in obligates me to share. This is him speaking to me. In no way obligates me to share the key things that were part of our decision. And just that was the end of the conversation. And I said, okay. And that was a very different type of curiosity,
Mhm.
that in fact, it I think a lot of that was driven by the fact that I had pronounced that I've got this. I'd made the broad declaration, and said it was a done deal. I treated it as though it had already happened.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that, and maybe that's some of the difference between the nosiness, because I think we can feel when a line's been crossed, there is it's flattering for somebody to be curious about what makes you tick. And Miriam, you're just so good at this. How do you do all of this? And what in your past has wired you that you can pull off all of these wonderful things? That's very flattering. And, ego, to the degree that we live from that perspective, loves all of that type of stuff. But there's a line there, as you said, that's like it's a step too far, when all of a sudden wisdom's going to go, all right, why are they asking all of this stuff, and what's going on there? So that's an interesting thing, to be curious about our curiosity and seeing if that's coming from coming from a good place in us, or is it coming from fear or insecurity,
Mhm.
or the look for leverage, or so that we'll have something on somebody that perhaps that we can use later to manipulate those. And they look very similar to one another at the beginning, right up
Yeah,
until they don't.
exactly. They can look very similar, especially if I'm not really connected to myself, then I may seem curious instead of manipulative, for example, or facetious or vengeful or whatever it is that's really going on. And one of the things I've done for many, many, many years is train and facilitate relational mindfulness. So relational presence. And that involves a high level of curiosity, the pure curiosity, the innate curiosity about what's going on with me. There's, of course, what's going on with the other person, but what's going on with me? Where am I
Yeah,
coming from at any given moment? And that's when it's easy to uncover the not curiosity that seems like curiosity, and then
yeah,
come into the innate curiosity, just to differentiate between the two. If I'm being completely present with myself and honest with myself, I will pick that up really quickly. It's like I'm not acting from a place of innate curiosity. I'm acting from a place of defense or fight or manipulation or whatever it is. And with relational mindfulness, it's very important for me to speak from myself. So I feel this, I think this, my impression is this, I'm judging this. So it's not about, yeah, what about you and why are you and what is this about you and you and you? It's me, I'm experiencing this. I can also share my impression as I sit with you of you is this. How does that resonate with you? Then I check. I don't assume that I'm right. I just share my perception and then I check with the other person. Does that resonate? And then it's up to the other person to be present and honest and curious and answer in an authentic way. And that works very well to keep in touch with that innate curiosity. It's like, what is going on in every moment with me as I sit here with you, right? Because I mean, what
yeah,
happens? I think that one of the most fantastic and fascinating things is what happens with me when I close the door and can no longer see you. You are not in the room with me anymore. Who do I become? Who do I let go of? What do I let go of when I close that door?
yeah,
And why?
yeah. So I want to ask a similar question to the one that you asked me, since you do a lot of work with relationship rescue and couples. Um, it seems like, there's a newness in in a new relationship where there's a discovery and there is natural curiosity that's coming out. And they people early on, when they're falling in love and they're thinking, well, this person may be the one, or whatever they may be thinking,
Time travel.
say it again.
Time travel.
Yeah, 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 yeah. um but yeah, it is, that is time travel, and it's pulling it. And then we start to get enough information, and then we start to build a mental model and an idea of this person. And it seems like I mean, I can think of my own relationships that I've been in over the years, that as the breakup starts to come, everything feels like it's very set in concrete. And you know, it's almost like one partner's going to feel like, I know exactly how they're going to, let me tell you how they're going to react in that situation,
Mm.
if you were just talking to one or the other of them. So how do you, in that situation where they're coming to you and they're in a position in their relationship where they've sought outside help, and how do you invite curiosity into the conversation with them, particularly when they're in it, if they are in that locked in mode, or maybe that's not as common as I think that it might be. Um,
Oh, it's common.
okay, seems like it would be. So
Well,
how do you invite that into the sessions and the work that you do with couples?
one of the things that is very, very helpful is to move whatever the problem is away from the person on whom it's directed. So if I'm in a couple's relationship and I'm looking at the other person and the other person is the problem, then the therapeutic tool can be, for example, is to move the problem away from the other person and put it into something else, like a pillow or a chair or something.
Mm,
And then we
okay.
can address whatever that is and get curious about what is that thing without it being he did or he said or she said or he is or she is. It is no longer about the person, it's about the thing. Right? So we look at the
Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
not the people, right? And it frees people up. And generally speaking, a lot of that will show up as um, how 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 am I going to word that? Okay, let me start again. uh, if I need to get curious about somebody, instead of saying he does this or she does that or he is like this or she is like that, that is a generalization that's not helpful, and there's no curiosity around it. It's a
Right.
decision, right? It's a conclusion. So I invite the moment. I invite presence into that immediately. It's like, is he or she doing that right now? Is he or she that thing right now? And the answer is predominantly no.
Yeah. Not now, but
Right. Yeah. So, but at least we get to the not now. And then it's curiosity. Okay, what is now? Because
mm,
what happens is then the people can see how they themselves sabotage something. They're putting it on the other person as he does this, she does this, he said this, she said this, or whatever, when it's actually they themselves. Oh, I'm doing that. I'm putting that on that person. I'm concluding. And then there's no curiosity about that person at all. So I invite connection with the present moment as much as possible, and curiosity around that. And I take whatever, for example, I take whatever the thing is and move it away from the people, as if there's a third person in the room. And then we talk about that thing and what it feels like. And we can talk to the thing and say all the things that we want to say to the thing, and not rip the other person a new one, if you excuse the expression.
so the what in that example, what would the thing be if it's not going to be the person? What would the, like, so you're taking it away from me, if you know my person, and we're putting it over here, and are we taking the thing being like the action that I would be doing that is upsetting the other person, or am I misunderstanding that a little
For
bit?
example, it can be anything, absolutely anything. As long as it's disrupting any kind of flow of feelings or communication or presence or whatever, take it out of the equation and put it in a separate, give it its own chair in the
Okay.
room, give it its own space, and let's look at that, because that is actually what the, I don't want to use the word problem, but problem. That's where the focus is actually. The things we're so used to attaching behaviors, habits, feelings, whatever, to other, or thoughts, assumptions, interpretations, to people, instead of looking at just that. So we take it away from, because we, generally speaking, those of us who have practiced presence for a long time know that we're not all those things, right? I don't have to give myself the identity of being that. I can stop at being, for example. So getting couples back to, this is a being and I'm a being, and then there's this thing. And we can get curious about the thing and stay, and also curious about the being. And it can also help them, because a lot of couples will have guilt. It's like, oh, I treated that person really badly and I feel guilty, for example, or I cheated, I feel guilty.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, but you're not cheating now. So right now, okay, having cheated doesn't make you a cheater. You did something. That's a behavior. So let's put the behavior in a chair and we're going to address the behavior. We don't make you into, you are a being, and you are a being. And then curiosity about what it's like to be with someone who is, and then have whatever it is, let it be in its whatever form, and take that, dissect that, take that apart and let it go, because it's not helpful and it's not happening now. It happened, but it's not happening now. And it becomes an invitation again into that innate curiosity that we have.
Yeah, and I, as you explain that in detail, I can see, taking the cheating and turning that into an event, and removing it from the association with that person, which, that would be something that oftentimes it would take an outside catalyst like yourself to help people do that process, because they may not, if they're just acting out of habituated activities or habituated responses, or the hypnosis of social conditioning or whatever, that's not necessarily an easy step to make on your own without an outside person to say, hey, let's just shift things a little bit here, and
And it's amazing how
and to
little.
see what we see.
Yeah, exactly. And also, what's it like to experience that situation as separate from the person? So it's like, okay, when you're in that amount of pain, or when you have anger or whatever it is, well, anger's pain, anything that's pain, have it in something else, right? In a chair, in a pillow, in a scarf, whatever it is, a doll. And then look at the person. Okay, without that thing on that person, what's it like to be with that person now? Because there's gold in there. There's absolute gold in there. And the more people can allow themselves to do that, they will notice that, okay, look what I'm doing to you. I'm putting this on you. I'm making you a problem. I'm blaming you for stuff. And then I'm not even paying attention to my part in the whole thing. What did I do? What am I doing now? How did I contribute to this? Okay, let's have a look at that. And it becomes a whole different dynamic, where it's possible to be present and open to all of it without being engulfed by pain and destroyed by it, or feeling destroyed by it. It becomes beautiful. absolutely beautiful. I had a really interesting experience. I think it's maybe 2 months ago, and I had it for like a month, where it's quite a spiritual experience, and I won't describe the whole thing because it's actually not so easy to describe in a way that can be understood. But a byproduct of the experience was some of the most excruciating pain I've ever been in my life. And just being with that, and actually the experience of that helped me understand how it is that couples, when one of them dies, the other one can die very quickly afterwards.
Yeah.
Because the level of loss was so absolute that I didn't want to die. As a matter of fact, I wanted to live. There was a lot to live for. It was just impossible to feel anything other than loss. It just ate absolutely everything. And it was a fascinating experience. And last night, I was going into that, having another look at it, doing some clearing work. And I noticed that what I didn't do, having had that experience, I mean, it was hell for a month. I did not choose avoidance reaction. Like it would be natural in experiencing that kind of pain. It was absolutely excruciating to think I never want to feel that ever again, and then want to try and avoid it. That would be the natural thing to do. And I would accept anybody who had chosen that path.
Yeah.
Or anyone, any choice that I would accept that choice because I know what it feels like. So to me, it would seem quite natural. What I did was, and this happens to me a lot, I go to, if I'm in this much pain, this is proportionate to how much love and joy there was to begin with. So then I start looking for, the love is not gone, the joy is not gone, the pain is masking it. So the person may be gone, but the love is still there. The joy is still there. The experience is still there. Life is still there. And I will look for that. My curiosity will go to that, and that will come up, and that will be what I'm left with. So as I was going into this experience of excruciating loss, I noticed fear coming up because it's quite natural moving towards that level of pain, which was eating my experience of life. And noticing that I was curious about the fear. And so the fear was just energy and not dangerous at all. It was actually really, really, really interesting. And my understanding that, well, of course, there's fear there because the level of pain was enormous. It was so absolute that I couldn't feel anything else at the time. And then understanding that, yes, the fear gives me an appreciation of how powerful experiences can be.
Yeah.
And noticing that still the love and the joy and the curiosity and the movement and the openness and the presence, all of that was still there. So the fear did not overpower me, and the pain didn't come back and overpower me either. It was just showing me where the love was. And so in couples work or in any kind of therapy for me, it is training to move towards that level of presence where things can be quite strong experiences, but not overpowering. And it's possible to stay present and curious and allow all of that and know that I'm perfectly safe. Feeling that much fear, it's not surprising when people just get engulfed is not the word, but it's the word that's coming. They just disappear into the fear,
Yeah.
overpowered by it. Yeah.
Overwhelmed. Yeah.
Overwhelmed by it and drown in it. And any kind of therapy, hopefully that works, will assist the person in having some amount of witness distance to it. Like
Yeah.
there is fear, but there is no danger. And I was fascinated by the ability to experience that powerful energy and not be afraid, really. Like there's no danger. There was absolutely no understanding of any problem at all, just the experience and how amazing that was. And that is the ideal, really, is to be that present to whatever is coming and be able to sit with your partner or whoever and be in that and meet each other in that and have that respect and knowing that you're fine. And whatever that was that's in the other chair, we can move that. It no longer becomes a thing. It's just energy like anything else, and it dissipates. And I
Yeah.
can see and be with the being and be with my being, and everything's okay. And we're back to being in connection, and we're back to being in love and all of that. Or we understand that there have been such great changes that there is no going forward in the form we had before. And so going our separate ways. But that is an informed, present decision and not a reaction to something that really isn't. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. And I love the explanation of it. Yeah, that's really in the work that I do. I'm rarely working with couples, but oftentimes another individual with whom somebody is the client is in a close relationship with appears initially to be the source of all of their problems. And, one of my core tenets, I feel like I've said it on almost every podcast, is that our feelings are not telling us about our circumstances, rather they're guidance to how we are doing within. And so I'm not working with both people in the room almost ever, but I'm hearing one person's version of how this other person is going on. And very often I will say to the client that I'm working with, wow, that seems like an impossible reaction that person may be having, whether it is actually impossible or not. Obviously it's not impossible because they had it. What do you think is going on inside of them that would cause them to react? And particularly when it's a romantic relationship, even though I'm only working with one person, it's often because this person has got a fatal flaw, and that fatal flaw may end our relationship. And if it's a guy, it may be that she's just a bitch. And I'm like, really, is that it? And it doesn't take too much to move beyond that, but the mere act of beginning to explore, what do you think's going on inside that person, that if they have, another tenet is that we're always doing the very best that we can based on the resources that we have access to in the present moment. And the resourcefulness of the state that we're in oscillates, goes up and down all the time. So, just beginning to explore, the phrase that I often use is let's pull on that thread and see what comes up, and, just explore that a little bit. And that is inviting without using the word. And then very often I'll come back in and use the word, let's just get curious to imagine what might be going on in them. And I think that serves the same purpose in working with the single individual as you moving it off of the couch and into the chair that's located over there. And now let's explore that event from the safe place, and hopefully a less charged place, now that we've removed the catalyst for the charge over to the other chair, and let's see what comes up.
Yeah.
And in the work that I think that you do, I know for a fact that I do, I all of the changes that are made from the client. I'm helping the client tap into their wisdom, their guidance. I I will offer suggestions and I'll say, "Have you thought about this?" But it's not a prescription. It's more of a question to say, "Hey, let's just go and explore this a little bit and see what comes up." And very often that creates the space. It takes away the charge.
Yeah.
And very quickly, so often the um, reactive stuff that we do, particularly the reactive stuff that we do that we later regret and go back and go, "Oh my God, where did that come from?" Uh, that's when we're in a very fearful mindset. We're egoically identified and we're operating out of fear rather than operating out of love. And the moment that you can make that shift, and with couples, I imagine, the fact that they're there together, they're both fighting for the relationship, and they're both doing, they've done everything that they can, so now they know they need to get another person involved. That is an indication that they want to work through this stuff, and that they see a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that's worth navigating this storm and getting to ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes one of them will show up almost to humor the other because they've already
Yeah.
decided, and then therapy becomes a way of helping the other person understand that there is really nothing more to get out of this, but it's good that they come. Often there's only one of them that comes, as you describe, but we have something that I find really effective, and it's a very exciting tool. It's role reversal.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see when I work with people who do not want to reverse roles. They want to stay in their hate, their anger, their resentment, whatever, because role reversal implies a certain amount of empathy or willingness to take the other person's perspective.
Yeah, not a certain amount. That seems like an essential ingredient to
Yeah.
the
It's
to
like,
the
what's it
exercise.
like to be you in this
Yeah,
situation? If I'm not willing to open up to that possibility, there's really no place for me to go, right? So one of the things in therapy will be inviting the person to move towards a place of willingness in order to look more closely at something. And one of the beautiful things about role reversal is that something shows up, generally speaking, always, that the other person didn't think of. It will be like, I had no idea that that person felt that way about this. I could only see it from my perspective, and I was furious. I didn't even consider that the other person might be experiencing like this. It was only when I stood in that person's role and spoke for that other person that I realized what it was like for them to be in this situation with me. And now I can actually go talk to that person, or at least now I'm willing to be open to another possibility. And I will often ask that question, are you willing to
yeah.
consider another perspective? Most often they say yes, but not always. Some people are like, nope, I'm right. But that's where they need to be for a while. There's obviously some pain there, and some people never move away from that, but the majority of people sooner or later will start going, okay, but they don't want to take the responsibility for their own actions yet. So everything is a process, and we learn and we open up and we get curious. As we talk about in this particular talk, we get curious and we get more curious, and then all of a sudden it's just not a problem. So there is great beauty in opening up to another perspective, whether you just consider it or whether you stand in the role of another person to experience it and listen. Sometimes it's like, okay, I want to say this to that other person. So I go, blah, 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 and then reverse roles. And that person says back to me, now as if I'm the other person hearing it, what I just said. So I
Hmm.
become, if you and I were to reverse roles and I said something that I just, got everything off my chest, whatever it was, we would switch roles and then you would say that back to me. So I heard it as if I were you. And what's
Hmm.
that like? Oh my God, you know?
Yes.
So yeah, it can be really, really powerful. And I love it because it opens up to so many possibilities. And sooner or later, there's love there. Sooner or later, there's love there. There's some sort of empathy and wish to connect more, generally speaking. And it can be quite beautiful, really. And it's fantastic to watch how people who you never thought would ever speak to each other again
Yeah.
all of a sudden hug each other. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
it becomes a whole other ball game. So I'm not going to say anything more about that because we come to the end of our hour.
Oh, it flew by. How did
Yes,
that
I've been
happen?
consistently curious about the clock. Is there anything you'd like to close with, Bobby?
Yeah, I would just, and as we've been having this conversation, I would just like to extend the suggestion. If you are listening to this and playing around or find yourself curious about the idea that our conditioning tells us our feelings are telling us about our circumstances, and we can always stick with that belief. It's the easy path. It's the path of least resistance because it is so practiced and so ingrained, and you can always go back to it. But I think a fun thing to play with is just be curious about the possibility. What if that's not what's really making me feel angry or anxious or irritated or whatever the quote unquote negative emotion du jour or of the moment happens to be? And just explore, what might I be missing here? And what might this feeling be attempting to communicate to me that I ought to pay attention to? And just use that as a little bit of an exploration. And, through all of these exercises that we've been talking about, what what often ends up happening is people lose their rigidity to the assumption that they have already made, and they become open to more possibilities. And really, when we are present, one of the things that I love that Deepak Chopra said was that, I won't quote it right, but I'll do my best, Deepak, is that at every moment we are standing at the precipice of the field of pure possibility. And we are conditioned to expect a certain outcome to happen. And that gets reinforced all the time because we go through the week and we make all kinds of commitments. And the vast majority of the time, we keep all of those commitments. So we just think the mere fact of putting it down into our calendar means that it is going to happen. And then when it doesn't, like that retirement plan that I didn't get, all of a sudden it's like, whoa, what goes on there? But just be open when you've got those feelings to say, what else could this feeling be telling me? Or two other questions that you can ask yourself. If this thing that I'm going through right now that feels like I'm walking through the valley of death, if it was actually the greatest gift that I would be receiving, what would be the actual gift in this, or what would be the lesson that I could learn from this? So, those are just three things to maybe kind of keep in mind that might invite more of that innate curiosity. And man, that's a new insight for me that I'm going to be exploring in the next couple of hours and days, of the idea that our inborn innate curiosity is something that has been conditioned out of us. And the reason that it's been conditioned out of us, oftentimes, it's just annoying to our parents. Anybody that's had a kid, little kids ask, why, Daddy, why? Why is this happening? And it's like, you get to the point where I don't know why, it's because God said so. Or, you just
Enough
look for a
already.
shorthand, and we try to shut down that curiosity and condition it out of the little kiddos that we're have in our life, but it's not gone. It's still there, and we can invite it back in easily and effortlessly with just a little bit of practice on there. And I know you have got something that you want to share that you've got coming up a little bit. So will you tell the folks a little bit about Defiant? I'm sorry.
Undefiable.
Undefiable.
Undefiable. Yes, I could tell them about Defiant. I'm going to thank you very much for that comment. Amazing, you guys. Amazing convo. Thank you very much for that. I would like to actually just add a question or two, which I like to use on myself as well when I jump to conclusions, and I may not even consider that that's what I'm doing. So in this part of curiosity that I've trained is noticing any kind of reaction I have, any kind of thought I have, any kind of assumption, interpretation, judgment, whatever it is noticing that that's what I'm doing. And then getting curious about, are you sure? How do you know? Because this is what happens, like jumping into a conclusion. I make some sort of assumption about someone. You did that to me. You did that on purpose. You did that to hurt me, whatever it is. I jump to that conclusion. And I jump to another conclusion. And the other conclusion is that I'm right. So you did that to hurt me is the assumption. And then I assume that it's the right assumption. And then I act on that assumption by perhaps trying to hurt the other person or no longer speaking to the other person or whatever I do, back talking the other person, who knows, spreading rumors. I'm not saying I actually do that, but it's like there are many that kind of behavior. So instead is noticing that I have a feeling, I have some feeling, and then getting curious about that, whatever assumption I'm making, whatever thought is there. Are you sure? How do you know? How do you know? If I think I'm right, how do I know I'm right? And that is very, very useful tools, this kind of question. Undefiable is an online course that I offer. And it is for anyone who backs down, anyone who feels like I got a leader in here somewhere. I've got great ideas, nobody's listening, or I feel like I'm a leader, but I'm not actually leading. Or I convince myself I give up, I don't dare. Anything like that, where you are not your best friend, Undefiable is the kind of course that will help you because it trains what we talked about earlier about empowering yourself, being present to what's going on with you, being able to let things go and stand strong in what will get you to where you want to be going. So thank you very much, Bobby, for asking. The link is there. You're more than welcome to go in and check out the information and by all means sign up. The course is being offered in English and in Norwegian because I live in Norway. So if you want it in Norwegian, you can have it in Norwegian. So that is today's Presence Posse Presents on Presence and Curiosity. We will be back in some form or other next Monday at the same time with yet another topic about presence. We would like to thank everybody who watched and everybody who contributed with comments and questions. And we look forward to seeing you again next week as the Presence Posse presents yet again. See you then.